I assume you know what that envelope contains. It's over.
It's only over when I say it is.
She signed the last page at 9:47 a.m. on a Tuesday, the same day of the week, almost to the hour that he had fired her. The pen didn't shake. Her hand was steady. It had always been steady, even in that moment 9 days ago when Dae-Jung Kyung slid a termination letter across his mahogany desk like she was an inconvenience he was finally done tolerating. She had looked at the letter, then at him, then she had smiled. He thought the smile meant she was broken. He had never been more wrong about anything in his life. Zara Mensah set the pen down slowly, adjusted the cuff of her sleeve, and looked out through the glass wall of the conference room, the same building, the same floor, the same view of Seoul's gray morning skyline she had stared at for 3 years. Except now every desk she could see, every chair, every contract in every filing cabinet on every floor below her belonged to her. The attorney slid the final document into his briefcase and quietly left the room. She stayed just for a moment, just long enough to let it settle. Then she picked up her phone, opened her contacts, and made the call she had been waiting 9 days to make. If you've ever been underestimated by someone who should have known better, stay with me. Because this story isn't just about one woman. It's about every quiet person in every room who was written off before they were ever truly read. Welcome to Velvet Empire, and welcome to the most expensive mistake a CEO ever made. Zara had not grown up wealthy. That was the first thing people got wrong about her when they eventually pieced her story together. They assumed old money. They assumed inheritance. They assumed some silent husband or powerful father operating behind the curtain. None of it was true. She had grown up in Accra, the second of 4 children, in a household where her mother kept 2 jobs and her father kept his word. They were not poor in the way the world defines poverty, but they understood the arithmetic of scarcity, the careful math of making sure the important things survived the month. What her parents gave her could not be deposited in any bank. Her mother gave her silence, not the silence of submission, the silence of observation. The ability to sit in any room, absorb everything, reveal nothing, and leave knowing more than everyone who had spoken. Her father gave her patience. He used to say, the river does not argue with the rock, it simply finds the way around. She had carried both gifts her entire life. By 23, she had a degree in finance and a hunger that no single career could contain. She took her first corporate role not because she needed the salary, but because she needed the education. She wanted to understand how companies breathed, where the air came in, where it leaked out, where the rot started before anyone smelled it. She moved through industries the way a doctor moves through symptoms: textiles, logistics, real estate, each role a diagnostic, each company a lesson. By 31, she had made her first quiet acquisition, a struggling fabric distributor in Lagos that 3 larger firms had dismissed as unsalvageable. She restructured it in 14 months and sold it for 4 times what she paid. Nobody wrote about it. She preferred it that way. The most dangerous wealth, she had learned early, is the kind no one can see coming. By the time she walked through the doors of Kyung Industries as a newly appointed regional director, she had assets that would have made half the board uncomfortable. She wore none of it. She carried no announcement. She arrived with a leather notebook, a calm expression, and a question she had not yet finished asking about the company she had been watching for 18 months. Dae-Jung Kyung shook her hand once at the welcome meeting, firmly, briefly, the way a man shakes a hand when he has already decided it doesn't matter. She noticed. She wrote nothing down. She didn't need to. The first year at Kyung was a study in what power looks like when it has convinced itself it is permanent. Dae-Jung ran the company the way certain men run rooms loudly, with absolute certainty, and with a particular kind of blindness that only comes from never having been seriously challenged. He was not a stupid man. That was what made it complicated. He understood markets. He read contracts with precision. He had built Kyung Han from a mid-sized manufacturer into a regional player with distribution across 11 countries. There was real intelligence in him. But intelligence and wisdom are not the same thing, and arrogance, left unchecked, will hollow out even the sharpest mind. Zara watched the way he moved through meetings, the way certain voices were amplified and others were quietly absorbed into silence. She watched which ideas received funding and which were politely buried. She tracked the pattern not with anger but with the detached precision of a surgeon identifying a tumor's edges before deciding how to act. The pattern was consistent, unmistakable. In 3 years, 7 employees of black and brown descent had been let go from Kyung Han's senior and mid-senior ranks, each departure dressed in different language: performance concerns, budget restructuring, cultural fit, role elimination. The paper trails were clean. They always are in companies like this. The discrimination doesn't live in the documents. It lives in the rooms where documents are never taken, in the tone of a meeting, in the projects that never get assigned, in the promotions that go to someone with less experience but a more familiar face. Zara had been collecting evidence of this reality not for a lawsuit. Not yet. She was collecting it the way her mother taught her to collect things, quietly, completely, with no announcement of what she intended to do with it. Some truths are not meant to be spoken immediately. She thought during a late evening in her office, reading through another internal performance review that told a story the numbers didn't support. Some truths are meant to be dropped at exactly the right moment, from exactly the right height. She closed the file. She looked out at the city. She was not ready yet, but she was getting close. The moment Dae-Jung chose to make his move came without warning, which is how these moments always come. Not at a performance review, not during a formal process. On a Monday morning, unremarkable in every way, 3 years and 2 months after Zara had walked through Kyung Han's doors. His assistant had called her at 9 a.m. The CEO would like to see her. She had known, walking down that corridor, that something had shifted. She could feel it in the particular quality of the silence around her, the way 2 colleagues glanced at each other as she passed, then quickly away. The way her own assistant had kept her eyes carefully on her screen. They already know, Zara thought. He told people before he told me. She had stepped into his office with her shoulders level and her expression composed. He was standing at the window, not sitting at his desk, which meant he wanted height, wanted to receive her from a position of physical advantage. She almost smiled. "Sit down, Zara." "I'll stand, thank you." A flicker brief, he hadn't expected that. He turned from the window and crossed to his desk, and then he said what he had clearly rehearsed. Something about the company entering a new strategic phase, something about alignment, something about difficult decisions. The words were professional and entirely hollow. Then he slid the envelope across the desk. She looked at it. She did not pick it up immediately. "Is there a performance basis for this?" she asked. "I've explained." "A specific performance basis," she said. "Metrics, documented concerns, a formal process." The silence that followed was not the silence of a man searching for an answer. It was the silence of a man who had never expected to be asked the question. She picked up the envelope. She opened it. She read it with the careful attention she gave every document. Then she folded it, placed it in her bag, and looked at him with the expression her mother had taught her, not anger, not hurt, just clarity. "I understand," she said. And she left. The security guard who walked her to collect her things was young and clearly uncomfortable. She thanked him by name. She packed her box without drama. She said quiet goodbyes to 3 people she genuinely liked. And then she walked out of the building into the cool Seoul morning, set her box in the back of her car, and sat behind the wheel for exactly 4 minutes. He has no idea, she thought. He has absolutely no idea. Then she started the engine and drove. Before we go further, and I need you to stay with me, because what happens next is where this story truly begins. I want to pause for just a moment. Because if you're watching this, you're part of something. The Velvet Empire family is built on one belief, that the most powerful stories are the ones that remind us who we actually are beneath everything that has tried to diminish us. So wherever you are right now, I want to speak something over your life. May your health be protected, the kind of protection that comes quietly and holds firmly. May your home be a place of genuine peace, not just the appearance of it. May every financial door that should be open to you open. May your children and their children carry your strength forward without carrying your wounds. May every person who underestimated you live long enough to understand what they missed. May you be surrounded by loyalty that is proven, not just promised. May whatever you have been quietly building in the background of your life, in the hours nobody sees, with the patience nobody gave you credit for, may it break into the open at exactly the right moment. If you receive that, leave an amen in the comments. And if you haven't subscribed to Velvet Empire yet, this is your sign. These stories exist because you keep showing up for them. Now back to Zara. Because what happened next changed everything. Her attorney picked up on the second ring. She didn't begin with pleasantries. Pull everything we have on Kyung Han, she said. The financials, the debt structure, the board composition, all of it. Zara, his voice carried a careful note. Are you sure you want to? I've been sure for 8 months, she said. I was waiting for the right moment. He just gave it to me. She hung up. For the next 72 hours, Zara did not sleep more than 4 hours total. Not from distress, from focus. The kind of focus that arrives when every variable finally aligns and the path forward becomes not just visible but inevitable. Kyung Han's numbers told a story Dae-Jung had been successfully hiding from his board for 2 quarters. Revenue was holding, but barely. 3 major supply contracts were up for renewal and showing serious strain. A real estate holding the company had leveraged against was underperforming. And the CFO, the third in 4 years, had submitted a quiet resignation letter the previous week that had not yet been made public. The board was nervous. They just didn't know how nervous they should be. Zara had known all of this before she ever accepted the job 3 years ago. She had known it the way a chess player knows the state of the board 6 moves before the moment arrives. She had taken the role to confirm what her research suggested, and to understand the internal dynamics that no balance sheet could show her. She had confirmed everything, and more. She placed calls to 2 board members she had cultivated carefully over 3 years, not as allies but as relationships, professional, respectful. She had never asked them for anything. That mattered now. I represent a group of investors with serious interest in Kyung Han, she said, in a voice that was precise and entirely without performance. I'd like to have a conversation before this goes to a formal process. Both board members agreed to meet within 24 hours. He fired the wrong woman, she thought, setting her phone down on her kitchen counter at 2 a.m., the Seoul skyline blinking through her window. He looked at me and saw something small, and that is entirely his problem now. The board meetings were quiet, almost anticlimactic, in the way that truly significant moments often are. She did not arrive with theatrics. She arrived with numbers, with a clear acquisition structure, with a transition plan that addressed the board's 3 most pressing anxieties with surgical precision. She had anticipated every question before it was asked. She answered with the patience of a woman who had been preparing for a conversation like this for the better part of 2 years. What she did not reveal, not yet, was her history with the company's CEO. That information arrived on day 8, when a board member who had done his own due diligence placed a quiet phone call to her attorney. "Is it true?" he asked carefully, that Ms. Mensah was recently an employee of Kyung-han. She was a regional director, her attorney confirmed, until last week. There was a long pause. And she's the buyer. She is. Another pause. Then, with something in his voice that was not quite admiration but was moving in that direction, please tell her the board is prepared to meet tomorrow morning. Dae-Jung was not informed of the buyer's identity until the morning of day 9. His assistant brought him the document. He read the name. He read it again. Then he sat very still for a long time. The version of events that circulated afterward, through the careful channels that board rooms use to process the things they cannot quite say aloud, was that he had asked to speak with her directly before the signing. That he had wanted a conversation, perhaps an explanation, perhaps something else entirely. She had declined. Not out of cruelty, out of clarity. There is nothing he could say to me in that room, she thought, that would change a single word on a single page, and I will not give him the satisfaction of witnessing my reaction up close. I already gave him that once. The signing happened the next morning. Conference room on the 14th floor. 9 people present, including attorneys, board representatives, and a single witness she had brought, a woman named Adiz, who had been one of the 7, who had been escorted out of this same building 2 years ago with a box and a vague explanation and no severance. Adiz sat in the corner of the room in a dark green coat and said nothing. She had not been asked to speak. She had been asked simply to be present. Sometimes witness is enough. Zara signed every page. She did not rush. When the final signature was complete, she set the pen down with the quiet deliberateness of someone placing the last stone in a wall they have been building for a very long time. She looked out through the glass wall at the floor below, the desks, the chairs, the people moving through a morning they did not yet know had changed. Then she picked up her phone and made her first call as owner of Kyung-han Industries. She called her mother. The restructuring began on day 15. Not with announcements, not with dramatic all-hands speeches. Zara had learned long ago that the companies who announce their values the loudest are often the ones who live them the least. She was not interested in performance. She was interested in structure. Because culture does not live in posters on the wall. It lives in who gets promoted, who gets heard, who gets the benefit of the doubt when things are uncertain, and who gets the door. She brought in an independent audit team, not to confirm what she already knew, but to document it in a way that could not be argued with. Every departure in the last 4 years, every performance review, every promotion decision, every salary differential. The findings were not surprising to her. They were, however, extensive. She read the full report alone in her office on a Thursday evening, 240 pages. She read every one. When she finished, she closed the report and sat with the weight of it, not with rage. Rage had never been useful to her. She sat with it the way her father had taught her to sit with difficult things, long enough to understand them fully, not so long that they started to own her. Then she opened her laptop and began to write. 6 of the 7 former employees accepted her calls within 48 hours. The 7th called back 3 days later, after speaking to an attorney of his own. She did not offer them their jobs back as an act of charity. She was precise about that from the beginning. "I'm rebuilding the leadership structure of this company," she told each of them. "I have reviewed your work, your records, and the circumstances of your departure. I believe the company was wrong, and I believe you have value that was wasted. I want to make you an offer, not because I owe you something, though perhaps the company does, but because I need capable people and you are capable people." Most of them came back. One chose a settlement and a different path. She respected it. Adiz was offered the operations director role, the position she had originally been passed over for twice, before the company found a reason to let her go. She accepted without drama, the way serious people accept serious things. "Are you sure about this?" her attorney asked Zara during one of their daily calls in those early weeks. He meant the pace, the visibility, the fact that what she was doing was beginning to attract attention, a feature in a business publication here, a mention in an industry newsletter there. "I didn't do this for attention," she said. "I know, but attention found you." She was quiet for a moment. "Then let it find something worth seeing," she said. Dae-Jung had remained in the building through the transition. That had been her choice, one that confused almost everyone who heard about it. She had retained him in a non-executive advisory role, reduced authority, reduced salary, a title that was technically accurate and entirely without power. People called it ruthless. Some called it brilliant. A few called it something they couldn't quite name, a kind of deliberate architectural justice that operated on a frequency most people weren't accustomed to hearing. She called it intentional, because removing him entirely would have been too easy, too clean. He would have walked away, told his version of events, perhaps found another company to run by the following year. Men like him always found soft landings. This way, he remained. He watched. He attended meetings where the people he had discarded now sat at the head of the table. He received memos from a company that now breathed differently, slowly, steadily, with the particular confidence of an organization that had stopped pretending and started becoming. There was one moment, about 6 weeks into the transition, when they passed each other in the corridor near the elevators. He stopped, she slowed. He looked at her with an expression she had not expected, not hostility, not the arrogance she had braced herself for. Something quieter, something that might, in a different man, have been the beginning of understanding. "You knew," he said. "When you took the role, you already knew." She considered the question, with the patience she gave everything. "I knew the company had potential that wasn't being reached," she said. "I didn't know how I'd get here, but I knew the destination." He nodded once, said nothing further. The elevator arrived. She let him take it. She took the stairs. Zara never spoke publicly about the firing. Not directly. Not by name. When journalists asked, and they began to ask, as the story of the acquisition circulated and grew, she redirected with the precision of someone who had decided long ago what this story was actually about. "It's about what gets overlooked," she said in one interview conducted in the same building, one floor above the conference room where she had signed the papers. "Talent gets overlooked. Value gets overlooked. People get overlooked. And sometimes the overlooking is deliberate. What I'm more interested in is what you build after." The journalist had pressed. Had she ever wanted revenge? She had paused for a long time. "Revenge is about the other person," she said finally. "What I did was about me, about what I believed this company could be. Those are two completely different things." The story spread the way honest things spread, slowly at first, then all at once. Other women wrote to her, other people who had been walked out of buildings with boxes, who had been handed vague explanations and no apologies, who had smiled their way through the indignity of being seen as less than they were. She read every letter. She did not respond to all of them, she could not, but she read them. Because she understood something about those letters that she could not fully explain in any interview. They were not really letters to her. They were letters to something she had become a symbol of. The possibility that the patience holds, that the quiet work accumulates, that the river, given enough time, does find its way around the rock. Her mother called on a Saturday morning, 2 months into the transition. The kind of call that doesn't start with news but with the sound of someone's breathing, the particular quiet of a woman who has been thinking for a long time before she spoke. "Are you well?" her mother asked. "I'm well. Not tired." "A little tired," Zara admitted, "but the good kind." Her mother was quiet for a moment. Then your father would have laughed, a good, long laugh, the kind he saved for things that were exactly right. Zara said nothing. She stood at her window, her office window now, and looked out at the city. "I know," she said softly, "I know he would have." What Dae-Jung Kyung lost was not just a company. He lost the story he had been telling himself for 20 years, the story in which his judgment was sound, his instincts reliable, his authority unquestionable. He lost the version of reality in which a woman like Zara could sit across from him and be correctly assessed as something he did not need to take seriously. That story was gone now, irrevocably. What Zara built in its place was not perfect. No company is. There were difficult months, hard negotiations, moments where the weight of what she had taken on pressed against her in the dark hours before dawn. She did not pretend otherwise. But she built something real, something that breathed with intention rather than habit, a company that looked at the people it employed and saw, with clear eyes, what was actually there. She thought sometimes about what Dae-Jung had intended when he let her go, the clean erasure of it, the assumption that she would process her severance, update her resume, and disappear into the next thing. She thought about the moment he had read her name on that acquisition document, the way the room must have tilted for him, the particular quality of that silence. She did not celebrate it, that was not her nature. But she did not pretend it meant nothing. "Now I need to ask you something, and I want you to sit with this question, because there is no easy answer. Was what Zara did justice, or was it something more complicated, a power move dressed in the language of principle?" She says she wasn't driven by revenge. She says the acquisition was about the company, the potential, the people who had been failed, and perhaps that is entirely true. But she also chose to keep him in that building. She also brought a D's into that signing room to witness. She also took the stairs while he took the elevator. Were those the choices of a woman purely focused on building something? Or were they the choices of a woman who understood that sometimes the lesson has to be felt to be learned? Drop your thoughts in the comments. There is no wrong answer here, but I have a feeling this community will have something real to say. If this story moved you, if it reminded you of your own patience, your own quiet work, your own rooms where you were underestimated like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it today. Subscribe to Velvet Empire if you haven't, because we have more stories coming, deeper ones, harder ones, stories that will sit with you long after they're done. You are part of something here, don't forget that. And sometimes, the ending we fear the most becomes the beginning we needed.